Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our webinars. I am Michaela, joined by Marissa, and it's been a while since we've done one of these, but we are thrilled to be back today and bringing you helpful tips and tricks that will support the productivity and well-being of your team members. Before we get started, though, I do want to mention a couple of quick things, and then we will kick it off. These are pre-recorded conversations. However, we are here live with you in the chat box, so please feel free to ask any questions at any point throughout the webinar so that we can get back to you. And one last thing, this webinar will also be available as a recording after the fact, so watch your email for the link to access that recording. And you're absolutely welcome to share that with other people in your office or your network that you think would also benefit from the content. So, with all of that being said, grab your lunch and settle in because we have some really great guests joining us today to help with our conversation. So, let's get started. As I'm sure many of you know, running a business can be very challenging. So that is why we have invited Paul Levering to help us kick off this webinar. But before we do that, Paul, if you want to introduce yourself and give us a little idea of what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Michaela. Well, I've started and grown 3 businesses of my own over the past 25 years. And in the past 7 years, I've been hired by over 60 other businesses to help them grow and solve problems as well. To do that, I use a system that I've used in my business called EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It is a simple, holistic set of tools to help you organize and run your business, as taught in the book Traction. So it's getting really popular. It's even on, I think, XM satellite radio they're advertising. So I think there's over 18,000 businesses running EOS as far as the business operating system goes. So it's growing by leaps and bounds.
I had no idea it was that big.
Yeah.
We actually, WorkSmart uses EOS, and I think it's been since about probably 2012, 2013 that we've really incorporated it. So this is a fun topic. And we also, WorkSmart, used to partner with Paul, your Raleigh-based company, FeatureTel, back in the day. I think it was about 2011.
Back in the day.
It was one of our early hosted phone providers. So, regardless of our connection, Paul, your experience in running your own business and then taking it beyond that and helping others is exactly why we have you here today, so we can pick your brain.
Cool.
Yes. Speaking of picking your brain, so today, like we mentioned before, we're going to focus on productivity and a lot of the factors that can contribute to it, but it's also really important to talk about the things that can slow down your team's productivity or diminish it in any way so that we can learn how to avoid those roadblocks when we come to them. And lucky for us, we have Paul here to help us get started by breaking down 3 of the most common challenges that business leaders may face when it comes to their team's productivity. And we'll also chat about a few different solutions that can help you and your team overcome those challenges. So let's jump into it. So as a manager, not only are you trying to get all of your own work complete and hit your own goals, but you're also trying to manage a team and make sure that they're set up for success as well, which when there's only so many hours in the day, that can turn out to be a little difficult sometimes. So Paul, I'm curious, how do you address the situation of, I don't have enough time in the day to do my job well?
Right. Very common. Hear it in every meeting I run. And the answer is, the number one answer is to have the right people in the right seats. If you don't have right people in the right seats, you will never have enough time. Right people in the right seats comes from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And it's the idea that you want people who are, the first part, right people, they're a fit for your culture. Right? You can even say like your tribe. You like working with them. They share our core values, right? And core values is where right people share core values. It just feels good working with them, easy to talk to, easy to communicate with. You enjoy coming to work with them. Those are right people. That's a good culture. On the other side, right seats means they're good at their job. Somebody is in the right seat if they're good at their job, the function and the roles they're supposed to perform. And when you have right people in the right seats, you have more time because you can delegate and not have to worry about having the right people in the right seats. Having right people in the right seats, sometimes if you determine that it's very subjective sometimes. As a manager, you can feel like kind of judgy, maybe. But as a manager, that's your job, to judge the performance and whether they're a culture fit or not. The cool thing is that EOS has a tool to make something that's very subjective a little more objective, and that is the people analyzer. So I'll share my screen here to show you the tool that makes that easier. So the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System People Analyzer, is where you would list your direct reports on the left here, and then across the top you would list your core values. So this is an example. These are EOS core values. Me as an EOS implementer, someone who helps people with EOS, these are core values that I live by, and there are 5 in blue across the top. Humbly confident, grow or die, help first, do the right thing, and do what you say. So we determine with each person whether the rating system we use is plus, plus, minus, or minus. You can see it down the bottom left side here. A plus means that that person exhibits that core value most of the time. Plus minus means sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, depending on what day you catch them. And then minus means most of the time they don't exhibit that core value. And then the last 3, get it, want it, capacity to do it. That's the right seat part. So you know if somebody's in the right seat, if they get it, which means the neurons connect and they understand the job. Want it, which means they have the desire, the actual deep-seated desire, jump out of bed in the morning, can't wait to get to work desire. And then capacity to do the job well. And sometimes capacity can be measured, where you might have some metrics to determine if that person's doing their job well or not. So taken together, you can start to rate people. So Joanne here on top, she's a rock star. She's humbly confident most of the time, grow or die, help first, do the right thing, do what she says. And she gets it, she wants it, and she has the capacity to do it. So no issues with Joanne.
Great work, Joanne.
She's good.
Yeah. We would like everyone to be like Joanne. Martin, he's humbly confident, grow or die. Grow or die, I'm going to say sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. And what does grow or die mean? Grow or die is kind of more uncomfortable with the status quo than with change, right? Change, grow or die, bigger, better, faster, more, kind of really getting after things, kind of being hungry. That's grow or die. And Martin, he's kind of laid back. So I'm going to say sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't in the grow or die core value. Help first, definitely. He's a helper. Do the right thing. Yeah. Do what you say. Yep, most of the time. Get it, want it, capacity to do it. And with ratings like this, everybody can't be perfect. So you're not looking for all pluses across the board. What you're looking for is to see if there's an issue or not. So definitely, if you have a negative, that's an issue. Where we come to Ellen, humbly confident. I'm going to say, yeah, most of the time. Grow or die, maybe the same as Martin. Help first, yep. Do the right thing, yep. Do what you say. I might have an issue here. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. And this can be just that maybe she overcommits and overpromises and underdelivers, or really wants to help and tries to take on too much. And then get it, want it, capacity to do it. I'm going to say is a no, because that do what you say, the fact that she's overpromising and underdelivering is getting in the way of her doing her job well. So you can use this tool. You can show your direct reports, right? I recommend that you have your direct report rate themselves, and then you rate them.
Interesting.
So that you can see if you're on the same page or not. So it's a starting point to have a conversation, because managing people is tough. It's tough judging people, but as a manager, what you say is important and what you feel and think is important. So this is a starting place to have a conversation to get right people in the right seats.
And I think that's so important for the reason you just said, which is you need to give that feedback to your team, and they need to be aware of it as well in order to be comfortable and everyone to participate as that good cohesive unit. So I'm curious, what, with your experience, is the best way for managers and direct reports? Like, what is the cadence for having these conversations? Is this something you wrap into a performance review? Is this something, what are your recommendations?
Yeah. So as a manager, first, when you see something undesirable happen, just as soon as possible, you're supposed to call that out, right? Not in public, of course, because you praise in public and reprimand or correct in private. So as it comes up, you have to address it. But there's a EOS tool called Quarterly Conversation. So at least once a quarter, you're supposed to be sitting down with your direct report in a very informal way, even if it's going and getting coffee or something, or just the only thing formal about it is that it's on the calendar. But in the process, you should be doing the people analyzer in your head so that when you talk to them, you can address some of these things. So number one, at least once a quarter. Number two, as the issue comes up, right? So if you're hearing from other people and you're noticing that there could be a core values issue or a performance issue, right person, right seat issue, you start to gather your information. And anytime we say you get three examples, right, of the behavior, of the negative behavior. So three examples, because one could be a one-off. Two examples, I could start to draw a straight line. Three examples, I definitely have something that the person can't come back and say, oh, well, that's just a rarity. I messed up once or twice. So anytime you see it building up, when you think you have to call it out, is when you do.
That makes sense. Now, there was something you had said at the beginning about people in the right seat. So we've got, right people. We're looking for core values. I imagine that when we're hiring, the job description and all those pieces come together to find the right people. But what is the best way to determine the seats? Because I'm imagining we need some sort of clarity around what these seats are to be able to put the people in those seats. Once you figure out the people.
Right. So determining the seats in the organization, EOS has something we call the accountability chart. And it's like an organization chart on steroids. So it's an org chart, and we can put the graphic up here, where we determine the functions that the business needs and the roles, the top 5 or so roles that are associated with each function. So what are people actually accountable for? And you can think of it like the formation or the start of a job description. So if you imagine you're posting the job description on Indeed, you've got the title or the function name, and then you've got the top 5 things that they're accountable for. And then, of course, in a job description, you can get into a little more detail. But when you have that function clearly defined, the roles clearly defined, then you can clearly define some metrics or some measurables that tell whether the person's doing their job well or not.
That's perfect. So just to reiterate, your advice to businesses is to start by hiring the right people, is to know what the culture is, what you're aiming for collectively. So how do you staff the organization so that it's thriving?
Right.
And then as a parallel, you're creating this clear accountability in a structure similar to what we all know, which is the org chart.
Right.
And then identifying those responsibilities so that you can make sure that the people fill into the right seats.
Right. So you can be on the same page. So the reason I say it's an org chart on steroids is because it includes those roles. And you and your direct report can look at those roles and be real clear about what exactly are you accountable for, the most important things. And that's what the accountability chart provides. It's just simplicity and clarity, because people don't always communicate well. And the simpler you can make something and the more clear you can make something, the better.
I've stressed to my kids that the 70% of communication is misunderstood, which is probably not a great thing because they constantly tell me that they misunderstood because they had a 70% chance of it happening.
I misunderstood you telling me to clean my room.
Totally misunderstood. But that clarity is really important. And I really I thrive off of feedback. I want to know what I'm doing at all times. And so to be able to know that my boss, Clay, is going to be able to give me this kind of feedback regularly and I can expect it, it helps me from from the bottom up and not just from top down. So this stuff is exciting.
I agree. And I think the combination of the two helps everyone be like a Joanne.
Yeah, be more like Joanne.
Yeah.
So businesses can definitely feel growing pains just like normal people can. And another common challenge that a lot of business leaders face, both when it comes to themselves and also their team members that they manage on a day-to-day basis, is burnout. And as your business grows, folks tend to be go, go, go all the time, trying to check off to-dos and make sure that everything's staying on track. but that can very quickly transpire into a feeling of burnout and you can start to feel stuck. So, Paul, what do you recommend for people who feel like they've hit that point and they've hit the wall and just don't know where to go from there?
Right. Well, number one is to know that it's natural, it's normal. You are you're going to hit a wall or hit a ceiling, is what EOS calls it, hitting the ceiling, and you're going to hit it. The important thing, don't get discouraged by it because it's just like any natural system, right? Where kids grow, they have growing pains, right? I know you can't see it on video here, but I'm a little over 6'5", and when I was growing up, man, my knees hurt so bad, right? And I didn't like it, but it was a natural part of growing up. So number one, know it's natural. Don't get discouraged by it. Number two, also know that you could hit the ceiling on one of three levels. One organization wide, like the whole company can feel like it's in quicksand or it's in molasses. Number two, you can hit it department wise, right? Your department can feel stuck. You can feel like nothing's working in your department. And then the third level, you can feel it personally, right? Life and nature is all about cycles. We feel good sometimes. We feel like not so good sometimes. So that's just to know that it's a normal, natural thing, and there's something you can do about it. With EOS calls it the 5 leadership abilities. I'll share my screen here so you can see them. So hitting the ceiling, a normal, natural thing. You can use one or a combination of the 5 leadership abilities to break through. The first leadership ability is to simplify. We all know in life and in business and in relationships, things can get complex real fast. I always say there's 2 kinds of people in life. Those that make things simple, you go and ask them a question and they give you a simple answer and you feel enlightened walking away. And then those that just complicate the mess out of things, where you go and you ask them a question and you walk away and you're more confused than when you ask them the question. So
The worst.
yeah, always simplify. The other example I give is if in school, in desks, if you've ever played the game telephone, where you start out with a phrase and one person whispers it to the person beside them and you go through the room and you come up with something very comical at the end of the room, which doesn't have anything to do with the original phrase. But if you imagine that what was shared was just one word, right? Pretty much that one word, being a lot simpler than a phrase, is probably going to make it till the end of the class, unless you have a joker in the middle, right? And they change the word.
Just throw it off.
Now I know how to cheat at that
I
game. I
know,
never even considered
exactly.
that. Simplify. Good lesson.
Yeah. Simplify. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. The next leadership ability is to delegate. EOS has a particular tool called Delegate and Elevate to your unique ability. It's actually a Dan Sullivan strategic coach, if you're familiar with that program concept from Strategic Coach. But to delegate means we're not all great at everything. And there are some things we don't delegate either because usual reasons people don't delegate. Number one, I can just do it faster and better myself. Number two, you don't want somebody to have to do that, right? Like the martyr syndrome. Oh, nobody likes doing this. I'll just do it. So when you do those kind of things, it's possible that you're not the best person to do it, right? You want to be the right person in the right seat to do what you're great at and you love doing. So delegate when you can, and delegate isn't only delegating down. You can delegate sideways, like on the accountability chart, to a peer. You can even delegate up, like your boss or your manager. You can tell them you need help. But ultimately, we want everybody in the organization to do what they love and they're great at. Better for the employee, better for the organization. The third one, the leadership ability, is the ability to predict. Short of a crystal ball, man, we'd love to have a crystal ball in business so we can just tell exactly what the future holds.
That'd be nice.
For real.
Yeah. But short of that, you have to basically set some goals. And this is, we'll get into the vision traction organizer, where we're kind of seeing the future, the vision of the organization. But to get better at predicting, it's kind of like working out, going to the gym, working a muscle. You've got to work it. You've got to test it out. You've got to stress it in order to get better at it. So we meet every quarter to set some priorities. But first, we look back at the past 90 days. We look back at the past quarter, see about those goals that we set, the rocks or the priorities that we set, see if we accomplished them or not, or see what went wrong, learn from our mistakes. That's another phrase I like. We don't learn from our experiences. We learn by reflecting on our experiences. So you got to take that time to pause, look back, learn from the past, and then set better goals or rocks or priorities for the future. So that's how to get better at predicting. Systemize. There's a right and best way to do everything in the organization. So you should document that right and best way to have a system. I'm a process junkie. I love systems. I think structure sets you free. So if I have the basic outline of how to do things in the company and for every position, then I can just set somebody free on that system. If I have a good person working with a good system, I'm probably going to have a good outcome. I could have a good person working with a bad system or a bad process, and that person is not going to look like a good person, right? Or not going to look like a right person in a right seat. And then finally, structure in the organization. And this is the accountability chart, right? This is where it's very clear on who is accountable for what to whom. And that's where the accountability chart comes into play, being very clear about what people are accountable for and who they are accountable to.
This, when it simplify, it seems super foundational. Then when you start to talk about things like systemize, I have like this love-hate relationship with it, because my logical brain might not actually be logical, but I want to think that you can't create a system for everything. You can't get granular to tell people what exactly to do and when. So that's what I hate about this concept of systemizing. But actually what I've learned in being kind of involved with EOS over the last 10 years, gosh, it doesn't feel like that long, but is that you're not coming up with the very specific prescriptive things to do. I think you said the word a second ago, which was the general idea of the things that we repeat to get the results that we want.
Right. EOS in the book Traction also says basically we're documenting 20% of the steps that give us 80% of the results. So it is exactly what you said. It's not micromanaging down to the keystroke and facial expressions, right? It's just the basics. 20% of the steps. So it's basically an outline. And when you set a good person on a good outline, they'll fill in the blanks. And with that, if they find a better way to do something, definitely edit that system and edit that process to make it better, so that we get better every day.
So we've been talking a lot about managing people and keeping your team productive and setting them up for success, but there is another challenge that we haven't talked about quite yet. So Paul, I'm curious, what is your suggestion for folks who manage a lot of people, but they feel as if there may be a lack of organization or cohesiveness across their team or their organization as a whole?
Right. So that organization and cohesiveness is what we call having a shared vision. And what having a shared vision does is it gets all of your energy and all the people in an organization rowing in the same direction. A lot of times when I feel like come to a new leadership team, it's not that they all don't have a vision, it's just that they're not all sharing the same exact vision. They have a slightly different picture in their heads. So what helps is to get everything documented, so we can point to a document where we can now share it. I can get it out of my head onto paper so that everybody can share it. I can get all my arrows pointing in the same direction. Much more powerful organization that way. And of course, wouldn't you know it, EOS has a tool to help you organize, the vision. And so we'll start with the VTO in general. So big picture. The Vision Traction Organizer is where we can document the vision so we can share it with everybody, so it can be shared by all. The first page is what we call the vision side. It's a little more high level. Core values, core focus, 10-year target, marketing strategy, 3-year picture. I'll go through each of these, but you can see this is kind of the zoomed out 30,000 foot level. And then page 2 is the traction side, where rubber meets the road, right? What's the plan for this year? What are the rocks or priorities for the next 90 days? And what are our issues? So starting off with core values, core values is who we are as an organization. And it really helps to have these documented so you can always point back to the source here. This becomes a living, breathing document and not just core values as words on a wall. And we share the core values with everybody in the organization. This is our culture. This is who we are. With core focus is, it's a filtering mechanism. I always say a filtering mechanism when you get in business, sometimes you can get kind of successful and cocky with what you're doing and want to try something else, or I've seen businesses even get bored with the day-to-day and want to, get that shiny object syndrome where they want to start investigating different opportunities. The core focus, once you know your focus, is a way to just not get that shiny object syndrome. Focus your activities. So core focus is made up of two parts: purpose, cause, or passion. And that's the why. That's the emotional component. Why do we work here, right? Why are we a bunch of people coming together? That's the emotional part, the meaning part. And then the second part is the niche, that simple nuts and bolts statement of what you do better than anyone. Since WorkSmart uses EOS, guys, what's WorkSmart's core focus as an example?
Yeah, so our core focus, we come together every day to create this long-lasting company that is going to help our people and our clients reach their full potential. And we're an IT company, and nothing in our purpose talks about technology, because at the end of the day, what we are passionate about is having these great opportunities for years and years to come. That's the emotional component of it. But what we do better than anyone ever is to make IT easy for users to get support by advising clients, by managing and securing their technology. So obviously one is a little bit more specific about what we do day to day, and one is a little bit more emotion driven.
Right. And so I heard the theme in your purpose, cause, or passion there, the theme of helping people. That's one of the common themes. Most commonly I hear either it's the desire to help, solve problems. Winning is very often one. I think Nike's purpose, cause, or passion was to crush Adidas. So they have a kind of winning kind of culture there, crush Adidas.
Not just do it.
Just do it, yeah. So internally, crush Adidas was their North Star.
Okay.
And then finally, just building a great company. Sometimes, regardless of what the company does, it just feels good to build a good company to help its employees and its customers.
100% sure.
Yep. So after core focus, the 10-year target is, I used the term North Star just now, but 10-year target, when I teach this with slides to large groups, I usually have a picture of a mountain peak, and it's kind of like the ultimate destination, right? It's also the start of alignment, right? Which direction are we going? What's the 10-year target? This also is called the BHAG, the Big Hairy Audacious Goal, from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. So 10-year target, it's kind of out there in the fog. We don't have to define it really well. Sometimes people have a revenue target here. Sometimes people have some other description of the size and scope of the business, like number of clients. If the core focus is to help people, maybe the 10-year target, we get a little more specific. How many people are we going to help? How many lives are we going to touch? This is the big guiding North Star, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Marketing strategy, the way I describe that is who we should be talking to and what we should be saying to them, right? Who's our target market? Who should we be talking to? And that's the target market. The three uniques are what we should be saying to them, right? If you are our target market, why do you love WorkSmart? Why do you love us, right? So these should be the things, the top three things. I say birds of a feather flock together, right? So when we describe the target market, those are the birds of a feather. We can describe the target market in three ways: the demographic, geographic, and psychographic attributes of our target market. And I always say that the target market is our best customers. And what defines a best customer? I say it's always customers, we love them, they love us, and they're profitable. Right? So three things. We love them, they love us, and they're profitable. The three uniques are, if you can imagine a client recommending you to a peer, what are the top three things they would say, okay, you guys need to use WorkSmart because of this, that, and the other, right? So when you define your three uniques in the words of your customers, that's really powerful. The proven process is a graphic. Usually it's a workflow. Use it as a sales tool so that a prospective customer can see what's in store for them if they choose to do business with you. And then a guarantee. Usually guarantee implies a money-back guarantee. You can also use a promise or a commitment here. But really this is, in sales you want to overcome objections. This guarantee you would just want to write in here. Whatever the most common objection is to doing business with you, you want to make sure that you have some way to address that. And if you can address it before your prospect brings it up, that's even more powerful because now you know their pains and you know their concerns. So that's the guarantee in the marketing strategy.
Super
The last item on the vision side of the VTO is the 3-year picture. And this is where we kind of want to get a vision. I have some teams who have even created vision boards where they cut out pictures of what they wanted. And the reason it's called a picture is because visualization is very powerful. I know when I was a high jumper at Carolina for a little while, and they would have me visualize I had a 9-step approach. I visualized my center of gravity going over the bar, and visualizing something actually makes changes in the brain. It's almost as powerful as actually doing the activity. So we visualize, we get real clear on what the future looks like. We set a future date 3 years out, a revenue target, a profit target, some measurables. And then we flip it over, where the rubber meets the road now. We take that into a 1-year plan. So that 3-year picture just sets us up for really good 1-year planning. So in the next 12 months, what's our revenue going to be? What's our profit going to be? What are the measurables for that period? And then the 3 to 7 goals for the year. Right? If we're going to take a step toward that vision and we're going to hit these numbers at the top of the 1-year plan, what are the 3 to 7 things we got to get right this year in the next 12 months? We break that 1-year plan into 90-day rocks. Where the term rocks comes from is Stephen Covey. I don't know, you can look it up on YouTube, but he would have people with a glass cylinder. He would give them a glass cylinder, and there would be some rocks, pebbles, sand, and water, and he would say the glass cylinder represents 100% of your time, and you need to get all these things in the glass cylinder. The rocks are the most important. And the way the exercise works is if you don't put those big rocks in first, you won't be able to fit everything in. So if you put the big rocks in first, and then pebbles and shake it, and then some sand and shake it around, and then water was the last thing, if the sand and water doesn't fit, that's okay because they're the least important things. So rocks are just another way of saying priorities. So again, every 90 days, we set priorities. We have a future date, revenue for that period, profit for that period, a few measurables for that period, and then 3 to 7 most important things for the company to get right, to take a step toward that 1-year plan and those goals that take a step toward the 3-year picture, so you see how it all fits together. And then finally, issues list. This is kind of like a parking lot. Every company has usually a long list of issues. This is the parking lot where the issues that we can't tackle right now, we want to park somewhere, and we evaluate this issues list every 90 days. So every 90 days, we check in with this long-term issues list and say, okay, in the next 90 days, are there any of these long-term issues that we can take care of in this 90 days? Are we going to bring anything into the present day, into present issues solving? So that is the whole VTO. 8 questions on that vision, on that VTO. And to get it shared by all is the other important thing. We can have a vision now that it's out of our heads, it's on paper, but we still need to, there's no such thing as over-communicating, right? I always say there's no such thing as over-communicating. It used to be where people had to hear something 7 times for it to dawn on them the first time. I think in the days of distractions and iPhones and all this, I think it's 15 times. So you got to
Dang.
repeat the vision, share it over and over again. That's how you get people to buy in.
I
We share it
completely
every
agree.
staff
I
meeting,
was
which
about
is
to say
monthly.
I completely agree with that because I've even found myself like even though I've heard it every single month for many a month now, I still will find something new or something will stand out to me a little bit differently than I've heard it before. So I think it is extremely helpful and valuable to continually share it and also ask for feedback. Like if someone's confused about a piece or would like to more information out about a piece, like leave that open for conversation as well.
And like to add on that anecdote, like from a manager perspective, being able to know that there's this whole organization responsibility around understanding where we're going and how to get there, that it's easier to simplify things and to delegate and to create those systems. And so I can attest that like that clarity is so important from both perspectives.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, for joining us today and
Yes.
sharing your wealth of knowledge and expertise around managing teams and helping to keep your team productive and setting them up for the most success possible. If anyone watching wants to contact Paul or learn more about EOS as a whole and how you can start to maybe implement some of these things in your business, keep an eye on your email. You will be receiving a link to access both the recording of this webinar and also all of Paul's contact information, as well as downloads for a few of the tools that we talked about today, so that you can download them and test them out in your organization.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to talk about my favorite subject.
So when you think about your team's productivity, you may be thinking about things like crossing items off a to-do list, getting ahead on work, or hitting your goals. But none of that can be done unless your team is set up for success with the proper tools in place. And like we just talked about with Paul, there's a lot you can do around the different processes you follow and the structure of your organization to help kind of aid in that increased productivity. But again, there's a few more technical aspects that if not done properly, your team will not be able to achieve that productivity. So today, we will be sharing three things that you can implement to help both you and your team members reach your goals with the right technology in place. So, jumping right into it with number one, this may seem like a really obvious one, but your team needs to have reliable computers that help them get their work done. And they'll likely need more than just a laptop, too. So, you have to picture like what they need for their job and everything that will need to go with their computer. And you don't want them to waste time worrying about whether or not they have everything they need or make them take way longer to complete something because they don't have the right tools available to use. So, making sure that you have a regular schedule in place that your whole organization is following to both refresh or replace old and outdated equipment can help make sure that your team doesn't fall behind and miss out on valuable productivity. Plus, a system like this can really help you manage costs throughout the year. So if you have that recurring cycle in place when you know things are going to be coming up that need to be replaced or updated, you can budget the appropriate amount of money throughout the year so that it doesn't all hit at once, or you have to spend unexpected money because you didn't realize that this device was going to be outdated this year, whatever the case may be. And also, choosing the right warranty for your equipment is important so that it's covered should something go wrong unexpectedly. And of course, there's always going to be a little bit of those unexpected costs that come up with equipment, but you can also add that into your budget as well so that it's not as much of a hit, should you need to use it. And just to kind of give you a ballpark idea, typically equipment and peripherals take up about 20 to 25% of your total IT spend. And in terms of annual revenue, that looks like about 3.4 to 5.4%. And you can use those numbers to help you create a per user budget. So that way you're kind of keeping everyone on the same track and again, contributing to that consistent cycle to help you in budgeting.
Definitely. We may have a couple of other resources to help you with planning those refresh cycles and what might be helpful, creative ways to ask your team what they might need and maybe create budgets for them to buy what they need as well. Well said, Michaela. So I guess that means we're moving on to number two. Our second tip then, if we were talking about the technology that our folks use directly, take a little bit of a step back and talk about the management tools that make sure that they have access and that they can easily do the things that they need to do while, big important part here, while maintaining security. It's not helpful if it's really easy for the employees to access, but then it's like really easy for the bad guys to access as well. So
True.
pretty much everything has moved to the cloud or can move to the cloud. And so that means a lot of businesses are adopting cloud technology, whether it's you're all in or just pieces. When you move data to the cloud or you move technology to the cloud, you also need to make sure that it's protected. So the good news is that Microsoft has 2 services that work hand in hand to do just that, surprisingly. The first one is Azure AD. It is an identity access management tool, which basically means it helps you control who has access to your systems. It's not just enough now to prevent people, to allow people into the network with a username and password. Now we've got them accessing the network in the office, but also all of these different cloud tools. So Azure AD gives you a way to control one account for your users and for your team members across all these different tools, whether you're in the office and using all this cloud technology. And it makes it easier to do it too. So if you're coming into the office or you're in a known location, there's less sign-ins required. The other part of Microsoft 365 that allows you to have this ease of control and access is Intune. Intune works similarly to Azure AD and alongside of Azure AD to control the devices. So Azure AD is focusing on the people who have access. Intune is controlling what devices can access. This most commonly comes up as mobile device management, but also there's other ways to control the data on devices or who has access to that with something called MAM. We also have lots of resources if you want to dive into those tools as well.
Yes, for sure. And that brings us right into number 3, which, as Marissa just mentioned, with MAM, that we obviously use a bunch of different applications in our day-to-day. And when it comes to productivity, once again, from our dear old friend Microsoft, we're obviously big fans of Microsoft over here, but they have a ton of different apps that can help both you and your team stay productive in just the day-to-day, what you need to do every single day, and how to track everything. One of those apps that we use here at WorkSmart a lot is Microsoft Planner. So, when you have multiple different projects going on that you're trying to juggle and they all have different deadlines and dependencies, it can get really overwhelming for even the most organized employees to keep track of and stay on top of. So having a task management tool like Planner in place gives you a single organized location to see everything going on. You can track your to-dos, you can hold team members accountable, which ultimately leads to the projects getting completed and delivered on time. And as Marissa was mentioning, we do have a blog on a few of our favorite features of Planner that we will also share the link to that you can check out to learn how to master the app there. Another app that we like to use over here is Microsoft Lists. Honestly, a list is really only helpful when it's easy to find, follow, and track. And Microsoft Lists can be used in multiple different scenarios that they have templates to help you get it set up for in the beginning, like tracking issues, planning events, creating checklists, or even performing team evaluations. And the best part is that they can be easily shared with whichever relevant team members also need to have access to that list to help foster that effective collaboration on things that require more than one person. And on top of lists, there are so many other apps in Microsoft as a whole that can be used to help support collaboration and productivity in general. So we highly, highly recommend checking out the entire product family and finding what best fits the needs of your organization. So far, we've talked about a few different challenges that you might face as a business leader, along with the tools that you can use to overcome those challenges. And we've also talked about a few tech tips and tools that can help set yourself up as well as the rest of your team to be successful. And of course, while all that information is extremely beneficial to your business, at the end of the day, we're all just people. So we've invited our guest, Becky Jacobs, to have a conversation with us about the well-being of your team and how to make sure that they are happy and well-equipped to be able to do what they do best. But before we jump into everything just yet, Becky, if you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit better idea of what you do at Simple Change.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Becky Jacobs. I am the Chief Engagement Officer of Simple Change. And we really focus on the core issues that impact performance and engagement, and then develop practical strategies that deliver results. Often people will come and say, hey, we need a well-being program. And my first question is, why? What are you trying to solve? What are the core issues? Are you sure you understand what those challenges are? So that we can actually develop solutions that make sense and create results. So I started the business, I can't even remember now, 2014, and it transitioned out of a few decades of work as an operations executive at various multinational companies. But I wanted to bring some of the strategies that I thought initially were just intuition about how I cared for my employees and encouraged their well-being activities, rewarded and reinforced taking real breaks and exercising and managing workload. And I just thought those were things everyone knew how to do, and realized very quickly that it wasn't quite as intuitive as I thought. So I transitioned into helping other organizations and leaders figure out how they can bring that sense of engagement and performance and, frankly, focus back to the workplace by blending well-being as well as those operational strategies for efficiency.
I love it.
I know. Well, thank you again for joining us. I am very excited to dig into this topic a little bit deeper. And over the last couple of years, especially, I feel like well-being in the workplace has become such a common conversation that both employees and business leaders are talking about, especially through the pandemic and trying to figure out the business world post-pandemic and what that looks like. But to help us set the stage a little bit, Becky, I'm curious, what comes to mind when you hear well-being in the workplace? What does that actually mean?
For me, it means people are bringing their best self to work. Their most energized, focused, productive, creative self to work. They're showing up, right? You work so hard to find talented, amazing people, and then they're not able to perform. And we're going to talk about some reasons for that. But well-being is across multiple dimensions, right? It's the physical, right? Eat, move, sleep. It's the emotional. And right now, mental health is a huge topic. And it's very easy for businesses to say, well, that's the employee's issue. That's not my issue. We're going to talk about why that's not necessarily the case. And then it gets into the social engagement, because we spend so much of our time at work. That's where relationships are formed. That's where connections and friendships are formed. So that's social well-being. Financial, which goes just beyond the paycheck, right? It's beyond the paycheck conversations. And then our broader community, our sense of purpose. Some will call that spiritual connection to something bigger than self, right? Where you have a reason to get up every morning and not just because I have to for work. So those are elements of well-being. And, at the end of the day, we want people to show up energized and focused and productive, being their best self. And that's what well-being really means.
I love that. Very succinct, like being your best self. Sounds so motivational.
It does. And what I think of, and hopefully I don't get this wrong, what is Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I almost think, like, as you described it, I heard well-being as like the pyramid at work.
Yeah.
In the professional world.
It is. And there's so many things that get in the way of that, right? Well-being starts to blend into diversity, equity, and inclusion and a sense of belonging. It blends into how we manage expectations and workload and communication. It really does encompass many things. So for me, that was the joy of, I thought I was starting in the well-being space and realized this is really about culture and driving business results. Because at the end of the day, our teams come down to our people. And if we can't help them to perform at their best, we're missing out on a huge opportunity for them and ourselves.
For sure. And you mentioned that there's so many different pieces of it, like financial and mental and physical. And like you said, a lot of that is often considered to be the responsibility of the individual, like it's their life, their situation, they can figure it out. But why is it such an important thing for business leaders and managers to consider?
So at the end of the day, right, people come to work expecting a certain experience. If you're coming into a culture that drives burnout, that drives exhaustion, that drives constant distraction and friction and a toxic work environment, you're going to leave. So right now we're always having a war for talent, right? You spend all this time and energy trying to get great people into the organization only to have them go right back out the back door, right? Or they're showing up, but they're not really engaged, right? You're not getting the best from them. So why does this matter to work? Statistics, there's some great studies right now from Deloitte. Well-being is a top priority for 75% of employees and 89% of the C-suite.
Wow.
People want to be able to work hard, yes, but I want to have a life. I want to be able to take breaks and not feel guilty. I want to do my best work. They're not saying, hey, I don't want to ever work again. But my gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this and still have life, still have joy.
There's a balance somewhere.
Yeah, right. The other side of that is 62% of employees and 82% of C-suites say they'd be more likely to stay with their current company if they supported better well-being. People are either leaving or they're not showing up in a very productive way. And it's often the work culture that drives that, right? We can put it back on the employees and say, well, you need to see a counselor, or you need to see a nutritionist, or get some more sleep. But what are we doing as leaders that makes it difficult for them to truly have that sense of well-being?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously with those kinds of statistics, this isn't obviously a topic that business leaders can just ignore, sweep under the rug, like you said, pawn it off on, a counselor, this or that.
Right.
And when we're talking about well-being, yeah, exactly.
I've seen that recently. I just had to laugh. You can't yoga your way out of this. People often come and say, right, what new app can we put in, or what platform, or what? And the reality,
take a break outside for 5 minutes. Like that doesn't
Right.
work long term. Yeah.
Exactly. Tell them to take PTO, and then, but why are you sending them emails and text messages the whole time they're pretending to be off?
Fake PTO. Yeah, exactly.
Pretend time off. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned a minute ago this recurring theme of burnout, people feeling like they're exhausted and they've hit a wall and they can't be themselves anymore and they can't get the things accomplished at work that they want to. And obviously knowing that this is such a major issue, especially right now, can you tell us some of the top factors that can contribute to team members feeling this burnt out, like stuck feeling?
Well, first I think it's important to recognize that it's not just I'm perfectly fine and then I'm burned out, right? It's not a switch. You start to see signs. You start to see those fractures where people aren't showing up as their best selves, right? They're more tense, they're more frustrated, they're more withdrawn, right? They're not leaning in the way that they used to. So it's important to recognize those early warning signs of stress and anxiety before it gets to the point where they're just done,
Yeah.
right? Where it's too late. So it's really important to get ahead of it. This isn't a one-time fix, right? They're not broken. This is a continuum of how we lead and how we show up for our teams. The top factors, based on the research by Deloitte and other groups, the top factors that contribute to burnout are surprising, I think, for many leaders, because the reality is it is within your control. 44% said it's because they're being asked to take on more work, right? Double, triple workloads, no extra help, just figure out how to get it done. 33% report that it's due to toxic workplace culture. And that means so many things. That's my favorite thing to help unravel. 30% are being asked to work faster. 23% say lack of support or flexibility over your schedule, your workload. There's no autonomy, right? There's no ability to choose how you get the work done, right? We often think about the traditional work schedule, 8 to 5 at my desk, I have an hour lunch. That's not built around the way our minds are most productive. That's not built around the most convenient schedule for our lives. it's built around 3 8-hour shifts to maximize productivity from Henry Ford, right? It goes all the way back to those times.
Right.
Our bodies aren't meant to do that. So in a knowledge worker situation, we need to recognize that people need some autonomy over how they get the work done, treat everyone like adults, and they're going to be able to deliver like adults. So here's the thing. We can't just throw money at this, right? And say, well, now we have yoga, or now we have an app, or we have an EAP program, right? Problem solved. The one thing that it's important to recognize, though, is the leader is critical to the well-being of the team. And they're often the ones that are most burned out. They're often the ones that take on all the extra weight and responsibility. I don't want to burden my team. They're tired. I'll do it, right? New programs are rolled out. That's on me. New team members, I've got attrition, on me. Our leaders are burned out, and they're critical to the success of the team.
That's really interesting research too. I feel like a lot of times when you hear burnout or whatever, it's again going back to the assumption that, oh, that's their personality. It's on them. Like but the fact that a lot of it, or all of it, according to that research, comes directly from their manager or leader. That's really, really interesting. And obviously that kind of naturally leads me to my next question.
Yeah.
If all of these things can be controlled by business leaders, what are some specific steps that managers and leaders can take to hopefully avoid that pit of burnout and just support their team's well-being overall?
So the first reminder that we often forget about, lead by example. Lead by example, right? You can't tell your team to take breaks and to take real vacations and to unplug and recharge and then work 90-hour weeks and work through every vacation, right? That's the first piece, as you are modeling acceptable behavior. What you do gets repeated in the organization. Lead by example, right? The second piece is acknowledge that as we talk about the hierarchy, right? The organizational hierarchy, are your senior leaders focused on managers of managers? Are they focused on supporting the leaders so that they have acceptable workloads? They have autonomy. They have the ability not just to figure out how many more projects do we take on, what gets put on hold, what gets pushed out of court. Like, our team can't handle anymore. Let's make sure this is reasonable. What deadlines are flexible? So really looking at that workload as senior leaders. For direct managers, explicitly inviting conversations about flexibility and workload. I can't tell you how many times people will say, everybody knows I have an open door policy. That's not psychological safety, right? You have to create an environment where people feel invited to share when they're struggling, when they're overwhelmed, when they're just lost. I don't know how to do this. How do I handle this workload? When they need support, it can't just be, how are things going? Great, moving on. It's inviting a deeper conversation. And that takes time, and that takes building trust that when you do invite that question, you're not going to shut them down. You're not going to judge them. Their career's not going to be sidelined because they're telling you they're overwhelmed. So that build of psychological safety in an organization is critical. That means when people tell you that the workload is overwhelming, you reward and appreciate their honest feedback. You invite them to be part of solutions, not just, well, you need to figure it out. And frankly, that's a very common answer. So we're creating a culture that supports employees asking for what they need and being part of that solution with some autonomy over how they get this done. And I will tell you, this sounds really simple. This is not intuitive. We're not born knowing how to have these conversations, which means we need to train our leaders and equip our leaders and have those mentors and coaches available so they can practice having these conversations and recognize when the things they're doing are really eroding their efforts.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I'm thinking of how do you have those conversations? How do you invite your folks to feel vulnerable and be part of the solution? And sometimes for me, it's just an easy reminder that it doesn't have to be this big problem solving across the organization. Maybe it's just a coaching brainstorming session where you're just listening most of the time and prompting ways for that individual to think about how they might get through that solution or toward the solution. Is that kind of what you're thinking around, like inviting that conversation and participation?
I love that. The leader doesn't have to have all the answers, right? You're not the ultimate problem solver. You're not the counselor. You're not the therapist. But you do have to invite that conversation. And I often tell leaders, are you using statements or questions? Right? Statements dictate an answer. Questions invite discussion. Are you asking questions? Tell me more about what's most frustrating about. Where do you get stuck most often? What do you think some options could be? You don't have to solve this for every person, but you do have to notice and make it safe for people to say, this is a lot, before they start looking for another job, right? We want to keep them there and keep them excited. Don't wait until they're just so completely fried that they give up.
Yeah. Just like how there's not, your manager doesn't have to have all the answers. I feel like this is a very personal thing. Like there's not one Band-Aid that will just fix everyone. Like it really is individual conversations and plans of action, so to speak, to help support, each person individually. And like we mentioned at the beginning, obviously we're all business professionals who trying to stay productive and get the results we want, but we can't accomplish any of those results without first supporting our team members and making sure that they're set up for success. And at the end of the day, we're all just people supporting people. So
I want to be happy coming to work.
Right, exactly.
I want everyone else to be happy and all the pieces that qualify as well-being.
Well, so that's a really interesting point, Marissa. One of the things I noticed some leaders get into the habit of is they go right into cheerleader mode. It's okay, we can do it, right?
You got it.
And yes, that's incredibly valuable. But are you shutting down someone being able to say, I'm glad you're excited, but God, I'm drowning. I'm struggling. I'm suffering. I don't want to bring that up because right now you're being all excited and I don't want to be Debbie Downer. So it's recognizing when we have those spaces to create authentic, safe conversation and not the 2 minutes at the end of the one-on-one before you jump into your next meeting, right? And I say that kind of out of jest, but not really. Are we in agenda mode all the time? Or is every conversation about business results and deliverables and projects, or do we create that space to say, how are you doing? For real, how are you doing, right? How are you feeling about your job right now? How are you feeling about your workload? And recognizing that some people are not okay. And it absolutely can be personal, right? Our lives are filled with blah. But what can we do as a leader just to express empathy? I hear you, right? I see you. That makes a big difference.
I think those are really good reminders too, because like we were talking about before, it seems to be like, oh yeah, obviously I check in on people, I do this, but in the business world, it's so easy to forget to do little things like that. Like people, you just get sidetracked by all the business stuff going on and forget that we're actual people.
Too busy to check on people.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably a good indication that you need to do things a little bit differently.
True that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Becky. We really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge about all things well-being. And if anyone watching would like any more information around the topic of well-being in the workplace, or to reach out to Becky and her team over at Simple Change, you can just go to, yes, please do it. You can just go to simplechange.com and check them out. They have some resources on there as well. And yeah, thank you again for joining us.
Not a problem. Thank you as always, Becky.
Good to see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the webinar and learned a few things along the way as well. We are always looking for suggestions and topics that you want to hear about. So feel free to send us any feedback or reach out to both of us at marketing@worksmart.com here on the screen. We will be happy to answer you there. And with that being said, we will see you in the next video.
See you soon.